Al, it's Tony and Bob here in our Eastern Connecticut studio. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Al.
Good evening.
Al, we appreciate the cooperation. It's been a pleasure speaking with you on the radio side a couple times with Chris, and now Tony has joined me on the TV side, and it's truly an honor to speak with you, and thanks for your cooperation. I hope you've been well.
Hey, so far so good. You know, I was laughing when we first set this up, at 7:30.
Yeah.
And I was telling Dan, I said, I'm going to have to tape Jeopardy tonight because that's my favorite show. And, in my hometown, it comes on at 7:30. And then in other parts of Ohio, like Columbus, it comes on at 7. And in Pittsburgh, it comes on at 7. So wherever I travel, I got to make sure I find out what time Jeopardy comes on.
I'm glad you could tape it, Al, and we'll try to make it enjoyable in its place. But again, thanks so much.
We won't have that problem.
It's an honor, of course. For our fans at home, Al, he played 18 Major League seasons between 1968 and 1985 for various teams. You might remember some incredible years he had with the Pirates, Texas, Montreal, just to name a few. Again, Al, a lifetime .303 hitter, played in over 2,300 games, has over 2,700 hits, has 3 home runs and 17 RBIs in postseason play. Again, we believe he's Hall of Fame worthy.
Yes, we do.
Played with many Hall of Famers and many former guests that have been on the show. And again, it's a pleasure to have him on. And Al, we usually start our TV segments with asking you about your upbringing in Ohio. As far as the sports you played, was it always about baseball? And maybe tell us some of your heroes and guys you followed growing up.
Well, actually, my sports background, of course, was all 3, football, basketball, and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, basketball was my best sport. And I had signed a basketball scholarship to go to Kent State University in 1964 upon graduating from high school. And then a month later, I went to a few trial camps and did pretty good. And I can always remember trying out with the Phillies. And then the Phillies said, Al, do not go to the Pirates trial camp because we're going to come back on a Sunday and tell you what we're going to offer you. Well, what do? A buddy of mine and I, we drive to Salem, Virginia for the Pirates trial camp. And I get down there, and I do pretty good. And Sid Thrifton, who was a scout for the Pirates, I knew I wasn't going to sign when I went there because I was just 17 years old. And so some way, somehow, they got my dad to come down to Salem, Virginia. And he called me and asked if I wanted to go to dinner. And, I wasn't thinking anything about it. And then all of a sudden I walk into this restaurant, and there's Dad in there. So Sid had this ability to quote scripture because at the time, my dad was a deacon in church. Mm-hmm. And, of course, my dad liked that. And plus, he wanted me to go to college. So the Pirates were going to pay my way to college. But the only thing that was in small print was if I stayed out 2 years, then that college education was nullified. So I grew up in a small town, which is in southern Ohio, Portsmouth, Ohio, the same area that French Rickey is from, where Roy Rogers was raised. And I always told people if I got 5,000 hits, I still would have been number 3 or number 4 from this area because those 2 names, you just can't beat those 2 names.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of town I grew up in, and one of my teammates, of course, I grew up with was Larry Heitzel. We grew up together. And Gene Tennis played on our same Junior American Legion team. And so those were the kind of athletes that we had in 1960. If you're a Pittsburgh Pirate fan, Rocky Nelson, who was the first baseman for the Pirates, he was born and raised here in Portsmouth. And we've just had a lot of very successful athletes to come out of here. And in football, the Portsmouth Spartans became the Detroit Lions. And that's the kind of history. Dale Wright, people like that were from Portsmouth. So we've always had a great sports background. And I don't know if you guys are into opera or not, but Kathleen Battle, one of the top opera singers in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
We grew up together.
Wow.
My goodness.
And so I can go on and on and on and name these people who have been very successful. And that's the kind of town that we had. And I think the reason why it was our upbringing is a very spiritual upbringing. It was like a big family in this particular community. Mm-hmm. And the only thing different, we were family, but we lived in different homes. Mm-hmm. And so that made the difference in a lot of our lives, and that's the reason why we went on to be successful in our careers.
That's
Isn't that a great story?
It reeks blue collar, Alan. It's just very appropriate that you ended up in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
As we continue.
Pittsburgh was the place.
It sure was. and Tony and I were talking right before the show, Al. I can't picture a more range of emotions than what happened to you the day you were called up in September of '68, which was also the day your dad died. Could you somehow frame that day for us?
What a story.
It's just incredible.
I can. That particular year in 1968, I knew that I was going to lose him sometime that year.
Okay.
Because he had worked at the brickyard. And he had developed silicosis. And so it seemed like with each week that went by, each month that went by, he became very weak. And he knew that he was going to leave here. And I remember coming back home after one of our games. And that year I was fortunate enough to be able to play in Columbus, Ohio, which is an hour and a half away. So I was able to come back home pretty often to visit with him. And I never will forget him telling me, he said, son, the only thing I want you to do is take care of your brother and sister. And that was his way of telling me that he knew that he was going to leave here. And I told him, you got it. And so got to a point where a week or two before our season was over, my aunt called me and told me that the doctors pretty much had given him a very limited time. And so one day she called me, and we were just getting ready to go into the playoffs, you know, when I was with Columbus. Mm-hmm. And so I got a call and said that he had taken a turn for the worse. I packed my car up and came to Portsmouth. And when I got to Portsmouth, he was still alive. But then at the same time, I found out that I was to report to the Pirates. And, of course, he passed away around 4 o'clock that morning. And so actually what happened was, you know, I had to make the funeral arrangements. And after the funeral, I got in my car and took off before the field to become a major leaguer. But due to the spiritual upbringing that I had, I was able to deal with it because Dad always had a lot of confidence in me, and he knew that anything that I set my mind out to do, I was going to be successful. He knew I was going to make it, although he never got the official word. And so I dealt with that fairly well. I really did because I had to. I had to move on, and that's the way that he would have wanted it because I had a younger brother and younger sister that I had to be an example for. So hopefully I've done a good job with the two of them.
Absolutely, and Al Oliver Sr., you've done good because what a story and an amazing story. And again, we are on the phone with Al Oliver. Tony, questions?
Al, it's a pleasure. It's so nice to have you here this evening, and thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted to talk to you, understanding about your relationship with Roberto Clemente, and it's sad. I mean, I'm now in my 60s, and I remember him well. People that are younger have really no idea of this man and his impact upon baseball. And he was very close to you, and he meant a lot to you. Can you tell us about Roberto?
Yes. First of all, he was for real. Roberto was the type of guy that he was kind of laid back, but he could rise to the occasion. Now, on the field, he was very upbeat and fiery. But off the field, he was the type of guy that was more laid back. He sat in his locker and observed. And where he played a very important part in my career was that I had already lost my dad, and I remember my second year, my second full year with the Pirates, which would have been 1970, I remember him telling me, he said, what you need to do is, I know you don't like being platoon, but just stay in shape, keep hitting, and one day you're going to get a chance to play on an everyday basis. And when you do, you'll be one of the best players that ever played this game. Well, it could not have come from anyone else because Dad was gone, and I really didn't have anybody. But Roberto kind of took me under his wings because he saw something in me that he saw in himself. And that was, our personalities were very similar. We both had a tendency to give people a semi-sermon. and and I always enjoyed, once he got psyched up, I know he gave the sports writers some sermons every now and then, which I know most of them didn't like, but that's just the way he was once he got started. But when I came up, I was a very positive guy, very confident guy. I knew I could play, and I wanted to play. And the writers took my confidence the wrong way. And when he came up, they took his confidence and the wrong way as well and turned it into a negative. And so that's why he was able to understand where I was coming from, and he was trying to help me get past that, not be concerned about what they write, because they did not know me. They were only assuming that I was a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so by him taking to me made things so much easier for me just in the 4 years that we spent together. And that's what he meant to me. I felt that he meant that same way, his same style to a Doc Ellis, to a Manny Sanguin, even the younger players as well, like a Richie Hebner, Bob Robertson, because we really had a fairly young team. And that's what he really meant to me, to have someone who I consider my mentor. Just like my dad raised me as a human being, Roberto raised me as a major leaguer. And so those two you couldn't beat because they both had similar personalities. Whatever they said, they meant. And that's the thing that I always respected about Dad, and I always had an utmost respect for Roberto. He wouldn't tell you anything that was a lie. Mm-hmm. He wasn't a liar.
And you know, Al, when we look at those old Pirate teams, and I look back and I think of you, and I think of Steve Blass, and I think of one gentleman, Willie Stargell, who just brought such a character to the game. What was Pops really like?
Well, I got to laugh because we did have some characters on that team. And see, Starge was a prankster. and he was real slick about it. The one thing that Will could do, unlike Roberto was good one-on-one, but Stargell was really excellent one-on-one with players. He knew exactly what to say. He knew what button to push. And the one thing about Will that he loved to do, if we would lose 2 or 3 games in a row, which we very seldom did, he would have a team party if we had an off day the next day. And what he enjoyed doing was grilling out. He always liked to fix up this Purple Passion, grape juice and grain alcohol.
Boy.
And here I was, a non-drinker, but he and Doc Ellis knew this, along with some of the other teammates. And I think that he did it just for me, to loosen me up. So, I like grape juice, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there with this chair and drinking this grape juice, and then all of a sudden I start getting this buzz, this strange feeling. Ooh. And here's the other teammates. They know what's going on. I didn't. And so finally, some of the guys started laughing. And I finally found out what they were laughing about. But that was Stargell's way of loosening me up because I was too hyper. In other words, I wanted to play so bad every day. And those were the things that Stargell did. He would always have a team party. We would grill out. And the one thing that I will always remember about Stargell was his demeanor was always the same. Whether he was over 4 or 4 for 4. And he knew what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. And he did this his whole career, because there were times when he could have gone off on the news media or someone else, but he never did. He stayed the same, and I always respected that, because somewhere along the way, somebody's going to do something to key you off, and you're going to lose your cool. But he never lost his cool, and he was a great leader. He really was. He you know, to have him and Roberto on the same team at the same time made the Pirates the team that it was in the 70s.
You guys were fun to watch.
Yeah.
You really were.
We were. And
I tell you, we had fun, too. We had characters. I mean, Doc Ellis's, you know, Doc was our first team lawyer. And then when Dave Parker came up, now we got 2 lawyers in the same clubhouse. And you could just imagine what that clubhouse was like. I mean, we were so loose. Most of our games were won and lost in the clubhouse. I've always said that, because we were so loose that once we took the field, our chance of winning was real good.
And Al, those years in Pittsburgh, for the most part, were played at Three Rivers Stadium after the Forbes Field move. And Three Rivers Stadium, Tony and I remember as young people watching Three Rivers on TV, you know, the artificial turf and the heat coming up in the summer. And
the Allegheny and the Monongahela.
Yeah, it was great. And Danny Murtaugh, I mean, I think you told us Murtaugh, as far as a manager, kind of looked like a very stoic kind of guy, kind of a player's guy. Tell us more about those days at Three Rivers and Danny Murtaugh.
Right. You know, personally, I felt good that we did move to Three Rivers.
Okay.
Because I went to center field in 1971, and I can see myself now playing center field in Forbes Field. I'll still be running. But Danny Murtaugh was low-key, and he was stoic.
Yeah.
The only thing that he would do is post the lineup up and sit down and watch us play, take a nap for about 7 innings, wake up, and bring in Dave Justy or Ramon Hernandez, another Pirate win. He had so much confidence in us that he never even concerned himself with the production that we were going to give him and the fans. He had so much confidence, and he knew players. The one thing that he could do better than anybody is that he knew when to set down a player and give them a day off. Because I know one time he wanted to give me an off day. And I said, Skip, you know me now. You know, I don't want to, sit down. Because back in those days, if you sit down, you may not get back in the lineup.
Right.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, I'll let you know tomorrow. I went out and got 2 or 3 hits, so I thought I was all right. But he said, Scoop, he said, you're not singing the ball the way that you're capable. I said, okay, Skip, I'll take the day off. I took the day off, I came back, and I was singing the ball again. That's one thing that he could do with every player. He knew when to set them down. He was smart. He was a really smart manager, and a lot of people feel, and so do I really feel that he deserves some recognition as far as the Hall of Fame is concerned.
Yeah, again,
he hasn't got much play about that, but I feel that he does deserve some consideration. But he was great to play for because he just let us play, and we just enjoyed playing, in Pittsburgh. It was just so much fun.
And again, we are on the phone with the great Al Oliver, and one of the many highlights of Al's career, again, 7 All-Star teams. But, Tony, between 1976 and 84, 9-year stretch, Al hit 300 or better for a variety of different teams. Just one of the many things. Tony, question?
Al, I'm sure you have the answer to this, and no one else I know does. What happened with poor Steve Blass?
No one knows.
Yeah.
And you know what? Only Steve Blass knows. And I know it had to be mental because it wasn't physical. Now, that I do know. And I know this year at the Pirate Fantasy Camp, we were coaching together. And at times I was tempted to ask Steve. I said, Steve, did you ever figure out, what your problem was at that time? And so, but I never asked him that. I think that he wanted to keep it personal. But if I'm not mistaken, he came out with a book, which I've never read the book. But I think in that book, he gives people the hint of what possibly might have gone wrong. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. A guy who had pinpoint control.
He sure did.
And I remember when we went to spring training, none of the hitters wanted to go in the batting cage to face him.
Wow.
And so, Stargell, Will, he went in the batting cage. He wanted to be the first. So, you don't want to embarrass a teammate. So Stargell went in there, and the first pitch, bam, hit him right in the back.
Oh, goodness.
And, we as players, it wasn't funny. We just wondered what was wrong because we really needed him. And whatever the situation was, we just hoped that he could figure it out because he was one heck of a pitcher.
Sure was.
And, but no one really knows. I don't think any of his teammates have a clue of what happened. Only he does. And I don't know if he ever discussed that with anybody or not.
Yeah. He was a Connecticut resident for a long time, Al, and lived right up the road from here. And I would go to sports nights in the off season, and he was just a hell of a guy. Very nice guy.
Very engaging man.
Oh, he's just a terrific guy, and
He's a great guy.
It was quite the story when it happened. And Al, when you made the transition, when you got traded from Pittsburgh to Texas, not only different teams, you're going from a different league, and to that Texas heat. And we've always talked, Tony and I, about the heat in Arlington as far as how it could wear at players and everything. It did not affect at all your performance. I just was wondering, Al, about the difference in the leagues. We were always told that the National League was kind of a lowball strike. Did you notice of anything like that when you made that transition?
Well, I did notice it, but if you remember the Pirates, we didn't have a strike zone.
No,
you guys swung the bat.
That's true.
Yeah, we just swung the bat. And someone had mentioned to me that at that time when I went to Texas, as a matter of fact, my first at-bat, I got a base hit against Ron Guidry, of all people.
Oh, wow.
But the thing about it was, someone had mentioned that it was only two players that they could think of off the top of their head who was able to make that adjustment immediately, and that was myself and Dick Allen.
Yeah.
But, yeah, in the American League, they did call it a high strike, and in the National League, it was the low strike. I would love to see Manny St. Again in the American League. I bet that would have been a show.
Yeah, we often
high fastball.
Yeah, we often talk about if he swung anything in the Pittsburgh area, he was going to be be at it. And,
oh yeah, if
that's
what
Ralph Kiner would say, that in the area code he's swinging.
Yeah, that's what he would say. Tony.
But,
and now as far as batsmen, I must say you were one of the best pure batsmen I ever saw. You're facing the pitcher. What are you thinking? What's your mental approach to hitting?
Mental approach was look fastball and adjust to something slower. And when I go to these camps and clinics and talk to young people or even adults, when I travel and speak, I tell them, first of all, God gave me the gift, the eye-and-hand coordination and the athletic ability, which I never took for granted. But I told them what I did we all played Little League Baseball, and we all could hit. So what I did, I took that same mental approach to the big league. The pitcher has to throw the ball. You know, you don't get caught up on if Bob Gibson is pitching or Tom Seaver or Nolan Ryan. You know, I hit the ball and not the pitcher. And I think that was the attitude that I had, and that's why I really never had any problem hitting the baseball, because I never got caught up on who was pitching.
It was, and Tony and I were also talking, Al, before the show. I mean, I had mentioned this to you during our last conversation, how impressed I was at the way you put your bat on the ball, the lack of strikeouts, as far as being known as a guy that had some pop in his bat.
Hard.
It was amazing, and you took pride. You told me you took a lot of pride in not striking out much. Unlike these guys today, it's such a free-swinging game, Al, and money, I think, has a lot to do with it.
Run the pitches up.
But and I know guys and guys that came after you like Ichiro and Boggs that probably could have hit more home runs. They
Right.
adjusted to of course hit for a better batting average. Was that the case with you, Al?
Yes, because in batting practice, I probably hit more home runs than Stargell and the rest of the guys in batting practice. But then I came back to reality during the game. You know, because I chose to stay on top of the ball and drive the ball. Now, if they try to sneak one down and in or up and out with the plate, then that's usually when I would take it out of the ballpark. But I enjoyed hitting line drives wherever. And my thing was to always put the big part of the bat on the ball, hit the ball where it's pitched. And that was the reason why I was successful. I never really tried to pull the outside pitch because that's what they wanted a hitter to do. And because once, as a left-hand hitter, once you pull the outside pitch, a lot of times you can hit a lot of ground balls to second base. And the thing that I have noticed today's players, as compared to the players that were playing when I played, when we struck out, we were mad.
Yeah.
We didn't like to strike out. But now it seems like some of the players, not all, some of the players, when they strike out, they just walk on back to the bench like, you know, okay, well, he got me out. But we had guys, and especially on the Pirates, I mean, it was like, to strike out was almost like giving somebody a death sentence. I mean, we just didn't believe in making an out. And nobody's ever gone to the plate every time and got a hit. It just hasn't happened. But we thought that we could do that.
Yeah. You took a lot of pride in it, and Tony and I talk about it all the time.
We do.
You know, people say, "Oh, strikeouts aren't a big deal. 200 times." To me, Al, I mean, you got to put the bat on the ball. You have a chance of getting on base, and we can go on to a debate about that. But Tony and I were also talking before the show about the magical year you had in '82. Now, you go from 4 successful years in Texas, Al, up to Canada here, and you had probably your best year. Amazing how many categories you led the National League. Again, you finished 3rd in the MVP, which I still don't understand to this day, but just the difference from going to Texas culturally to a different country, those 2 years in Montreal, Al, you did well.
Yes, you know, again, you know, we're talking about baseball,
right?
And I know that I was asked, you know, because a lot of players didn't like to play in Canada, and especially in Montreal, because that field up there wasn't totally complete. There were some players that was concerned that one day the roof might cave in.
Yeah.
I said, oh, Lord. I said, well, I didn't need that. But I just had this mental attitude about me that it still stands to this day. I just can't help myself. I just felt that, you know, the pitching mound was the same distance, and, you know, regardless of where you played, you still had to hit the ball. And I just, like my mother said when I was like 4 or 5 years old, Junior is going to be a ball player. And that's probably the best way to say about Al Oliver, that he was just a ball player. I enjoyed playing ball, whether it's basketball, football, ping pong, horseshoes, or volleyball, whatever it might be. I just enjoyed playing it, and I'm just glad that I did have the chance to play Major League Baseball, to play with some good players, some great players, good people, great people, which made things so much easier for me. And to be on contending teams and winning teams, you know, that made my career go by pretty quick.
And now, like we said before, we had talked to some of your ex-teammates on this show, and like you said, characters: Mudcat Grant, Jim Rooker, Jerry Royce, Billy Sample. I mean, there's some characters in this group, but they were all so enjoyable. But it was great. A couple more minutes, Tony, with Al. Question?
And Al, you know, I really strongly believe, Bob does as well, that you should be a member of the Hall of Fame. We do not understand why you are not. And do you think about it? Do you think perhaps it was the collusion thing that perhaps caused the vote that one day to cause you to get 4%? Or, you know, shall we be seeing you in Cooperstown? And I really believe we should. Your thoughts, please.
My thoughts on Cooperstown, I don't believe that I will ever go to Cooperstown. If I would ever get that call, I hope somebody is around me so they can call 911.
We'll be up. We'll be there.
Because I really haven't thought about it because of the vote balloting that I've been getting. It's been very low. And there's no legitimate reason why I should not have gotten more votes than what I have gotten. You know, I've looked at the Hall of Fame rules. You know, it's contribution to teams, and every team I played on, I made some kind of contribution. I think the thing that has been overlooked with me is my defense.
Yes,
we agree.
We were talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about it was I had to make all these defensive changes for the betterment of the team. Now, these days, when players do that, they are applauded for that. But when I did it, I was not. And there was a slight adjustment period that I had to make when I had to make these changes, but my offensive output didn't suffer. And so that's what I think they've overlooked. The things that I had to do to help my teams be better. And it wasn't that I couldn't play defense, because I could. But I think that's the one thing, if anything, they might be holding against me. They really haven't given that much thought. But, no, I really haven't thought much about it because I really feel that I'm not going to go. My family feels I'm going to go. My friends feel that I'm going to go. My fans feel that I'm going to go. And the only thing I can say is this, you know, like I said, if I ever get that call, I just hope somebody's close to me so they can call 911.
Well, again, Al, you have our utmost support, and one of the things we admire most about you is the non-bitterness you do show. And I trust me, the guys that have covered baseball and are truly involved in the game, Al, they know who belongs, who probably doesn't, and trust me, you're with us.
They do.
And again, Al, we want to find out, again, before we let you go, what you're doing these days. We know you do a lot of speaking engagement. I should tell our viewers, al-oliver.com. Also, you can follow him on Twitter, alscoop16. Al, tell us about what you're doing these days. You're helping a lot of people.
Yes. You know, I enjoy traveling around the country, you know, building self-esteem in people. And, you know, the way the world is today, it's so much negativity. And, you know, I try to emphasize being positive in a negative society. To our young people, I stress to them, get on base, not on drugs. And, you know, my goal has always been to do 2 or 3 speaking engagements per month. And if I could ever get to that point, last year was a good year for me. I did 2. a month. But, you know, sometimes it comes down to exposure. Because I know that if I get the opportunity to bring messages to whomever, I know that I can make a difference. You know, I know that I can motivate people. But the most important thing is when you go to motivate people and when you leave there motivated, then you know that you've done your job. And so that's what I'm doing these days.
And Al, as far as your life, your legacy, the things you've done, how would you like to be remembered?
That's a tough one. I thought about this not too long ago when I went on my tombstone. And I said, one time I said, forgive those that took my confidence the wrong way because they just didn't understand what true confidence was. I forgive them.
That's, again, part of the non-bitter attitude that has us marveling at
You're really a joy to speak to, Al.
Al, it's been
really
an immense pleasure. I'm sure we'll talk again on the radio side soon. Chris and I always enjoy our conversations, and we can't thank you enough for being so generous with your time. Again, Tony and I grew up marveling at you, and we still do.
You gave us a lot of fun, Al.
Thanks so much, Al, and please stay in touch. You're always welcome here.
Well, you guys take care and just keep doing the good work that you guys are doing.
Good night, Al. Be well.
Thank you, Al.
Okay, you too.
Take
All
care.
righty.
Bye-bye.